Welcome back to the Body Composition Coach podcast, and today we are going to talk about what sounds like a complex subject. It's actually nowhere near as complex as what it sounds, not in the context of which we're going to talk about it. But the inspiration for this podcast today was because I saw a post from another coach on this subject. Well, it was a results post actually, and I'll go into that in a second. But it made it almost sound way more complex than it needed to be. And I thought about you guys at the time who kind of listen to this and talk to me on a weekly basis and get really frustrated because they hear about this subject and they're almost scared of it. Like you guys are almost scared of this subject because you think that you're broken, you think that you're not going to make progress because of it. So I want to make sure that by the end of this podcast, I take this what sounds like a very in-depth and deep and complicated subject, and I make it really simple and digestible for you so that you can actually spot where people are using this to sell things to you, to confuse you, to make you feel like you're broken. So we'll get into that in a second, but as always, leave me a review. Let me know if you're enjoying these podcasts. I do this for free to get as much impact and information out there to people like you to help you move forward. So a small comment, a share, a review, anything like that just helps me to get this podcast out to more people and create more impact, which is the whole point of it. So that aside, let's get stuck into it. So I'll tell you what the post was in simple terms and why it got under my skin a little bit, and hopefully you'll understand. The post was a results post from another coach of a woman who had some incredible results. That he'd achieved some amazing results with her, and it was great. Like absolutely hats off to them. But it was when I read what he had done or how he had achieved the results that really got me thinking. And the sentence was optimized estrogen and somatotropin. Somatotropin is growth hormone. In simple terms, I'm going to refer to it as growth hormone from now. And before you switch off and think, oh my God, this sounds horrendously complex, it's really not. It's actually quite simple. And if you were also worried like, oh my God, I don't want growth hormone, I don't want any of that, you have no choice. You have lots of growth hormone naturally. Well, maybe not lots, and that might be the problem for some people, but you have growth hormone naturally within your body. It helps with things like recovery and that kind of thing. It's not the sort of stuff that you inject and suddenly get massive off, like steroids, that kind of thing. I mean, you could be thinking of it in that context, but that's not the context we're talking about it in. Estrogen, you'll have heard of. This is a very commonly talked about hormone within female health and that kind of thing. So what this coach basically said is we optimize estrogen and somatotropin. And now, for someone like myself who understands this subject, who understands hormones, how they function, that kind of thing, I actually know what that means. But I was thinking about this from your point of view. Like, if I was just, had a normal job and a normal person just trying to lose some body fat, build some muscle, what would that mean to me? And I think actually the wording is what's really important here, like the language. Because I think wording and language like that, it creates distance between yourself and the result that you are looking to achieve. It almost, when I say to you that, if I said to you I achieved a result with a client because I optimized their estrogen and somatotropin, you would be like, oh my God, how on earth do I do that? I have no idea what to do with that. Maybe I'm broken. Maybe my estrogen's wrong. Maybe I don't have any of that somatotropin growth hormone stuff. And I would think that's a well-justified reaction to that comment. And this is why the language is such a problem. It's created distance between you, the person who wants to achieve the result, and the result itself. And it's made you feel like there is no way I can fix this problem. There's no way that this problem can be fixed. Actually, I'm probably broken with this estrogen somatotropin stuff. Well, that's actually not the case if you understand what estrogen and somatotropin do, but also how you can affect them. And this is where I have an issue with the industry right now. If we're creating distance between you, the person who wants the result, and the result, we're creating dependence on you, the person who wants the result, and us as coaches. That is never going to help people in general across a broad spectrum, everyone in the country, everyone in the world, to improve their body fat levels, improve their muscle mass, improve their health, make long-term change. And I just don't think that comes from an angle that we as coaches should be coming from, is the best way I can put that. Now, this is no criticism of the coach, but I think we as coaches have to be more conscious of our language and make sure that we do simplify this stuff where it needs simplifying. That's really important because not everything needs to be simplified. Actually, sometimes things need to be less simplified, like the idea of like you're going to get an amazing result just because you're in a calorie deficit, or you're going to get an amazing result just because you eat more protein, right? That's sometimes oversimplifying. And I did a whole podcast on this where sometimes you do need to go down the more complicated route. But when it comes to biology, if we're making your biology sound like a problem that only an expert can fix, I think we're just creating space and we're creating distance between you and a result. And actually, what I want to do today is close that gap. So let's start with the simple stuff, right? When we're talking about optimizing estrogen and somatotropin, what this coach apparently did with their client, we probably need to understand what estrogen and somatotropin actually do. Now, estrogen is a hormone that is heavily involved in recovery. It's heavily involved in building muscle. It's heavily involved in your bone density. It's heavily involved in shaping where you store fat. Now, this is what you'll have probably heard about, especially if you're getting close to menopause, perimenopause, postmenopause. Estrogen is one of the dictating factors as to where you will store fat. Now, where we have to be really clear here is it may mean that you stop storing fat on your, or as much fat on your upper body, and you start to store more fat around like your hips and lower tummy, for example. And that's one of the things that a lot of the women that I work with talk about when they're getting into menopause or towards menopause. It feels like they're holding more weight. Now, generally, it's not the case. Like estrogen from that angle isn't so much going to change how much body fat you hold or how possible it is to lose the body fat, but it is going to change where you store it, which can change the way you feel about your body and how you feel about your fat storage and your shape and that kind of thing. Now, that's estrogen in simple terms. It's going to help with muscle, it's going to help with bone, it's going to be a deciding factor in fat storage and dispersion. Is that a word? How it's dispersed? If that's not a word. And it helps with recovery. Now, very much in the same way that growth hormone does a very similar thing. It's like the overnight workman, the repair crew. It rebuilds tissue whilst you're sleeping. Like while you're sleeping is when growth hormone is actually going to be active. So working well with both of these things, your recovery is going to be better. You're going to have more muscle. You're going to have better body composition. And that's like the whole purpose, really, in simple terms. And this is what I mean. It has to be simplified for everybody to be able to really understand this subject. But that, in simple terms, is what estrogen and growth hormone somatotropin do. Now, I talked a little bit there about how estrogen is not something that really means you hold more body fat necessarily. It's usually more a case of it changing the way that your body fat is dispersed, which makes you feel like you're holding more body fat. But the nuance to all of this is that like biology is real, and I want to make that really, really clear. Like biology is real. Menopause, perimenopause, PCOS, like these are all real conditions that affect estrogen and how you store your body fat. But what has to be made clear is whilst it changes the context in that you store body fat differently, it doesn't change the fundamentals of how you lose body fat or whether you can lose body fat. And this is where the lines are often blurred with estrogen, is that we think that estrogen is somehow like broken, or our estrogen levels are somehow broken, especially as we get towards menopause and perimenopause and postmenopause. But we think it's broken, and suddenly, like that must be the problem. I've got a hormonal problem, I've got an estrogen problem. Listen, to be very, very clear, it changes the context. It can change the way you feel. It can change the way you show up. It can change your whole experience, but it doesn't change the fundamentals of building muscle and losing body fat. I'll repeat, it does not change the fundamentals of losing body fat and building muscle. Now, what we should probably talk about then, if we're going to talk about estrogen and growth hormone, if this coach has optimized these things, like what secret do they know that you don't? Like how have they done that? Well, let me clarify that for you. If I tell you that estrogen is improved by a few things, not being on a chronic diet, You'll have heard me talk about that before. So not always dieting all the time. Making sure you're eating enough fat, really important. Managing your stress and lifting heavy weights. Like, they're the 4 things that optimize your estrogen. Suddenly, it sounds way less complex, right? So hang on, if I'm going to, let's say you're my client in front of me, I'm going to optimize your estrogen. You probably think, oh my God, this man's an absolute genius. But if I don't say I'm going to optimize your estrogen, and if I just say, right, we just need to stop you chronically dieting, we need to fuel you properly, we need to make sure you're getting enough fat, dietary fat, that's really important for estrogen production. We're going to manage your stress, and we're going to get you lifting some heavy weights. That doesn't sound complex at all, right? That's probably what you'd expect me to do as my job. So you can see here, when I talk about language being really important, if I say optimize your estrogen, you have a dependency on me. You think this guy's a genius. I can only get here if this guy fixes me. It puts a distance between you and your end result and makes it feel like it's further away than ever. If I explain it to you that to optimize estrogen, the 4 things that heavily influence your estrogen production, not chronically dieting, eating enough fat, managing stress, and lifting, suddenly that feels manageable. It feels like something you can do. The same thing with growth hormone. Well, I told you earlier that growth hormone, or somatotropan, is only really active during the night when you're sleeping and when you're having a good quality sleep. So you can probably guess the main trigger for somatotropan production or growth hormone production. And that is having a decent night's sleep. Heavy training is the stimulus, but getting a good night's sleep is going to help you produce more growth hormone and more somatotropan, whichever word we're going to use here. Heavy, compound, strong lifting with good technique and sleep. So suddenly, what was such a complex subject, or what it sounded like, is suddenly very, very simple. You need to fuel yourself, eat fat, manage stress, lift, sleep, and lift again, right? Lift again, lift more. So we're talking about 5 things really there. You can say lift twice, but it's basically 5 things that optimize your hormones. So suddenly, when we're talking about hormone optimization, we're actually making it sound very, very simple. And this is where, like I said, the language becomes very, very important. So I would say that there has to be then a very honest question here. How much time do you really need to invest into optimizing your hormones if actually the levers to optimize them are reasonably simple? Well, to take what are already healthy hormones or healthy hormone function to optimal would change pretty much nothing. Like, you're really talking about such fine margins there. It would change pretty much nothing. The things that would really move the needle for you is like progressive overload, strong nutrition profiling, very good recovery, very good consistency across the board. Like, that's where you should be pouring in all of your, I was going to say some, but all of your effort, really. If, though, on the other hand, your hormones are underfunctioning, hugely impaired, you're not producing estrogen, you're not producing enough growth hormone, that is then impacting the result that you're going to get. And that could be the case. Let me be clear. It could be that your hormones are like misfunctioning, let's call it. So getting them to function would make a big difference to your fat storage, to the way you recover, to the way you build muscle and whole body fat. So absolutely, you could come away from this podcast and think, do you know what? I do need to optimize my hormones. But here's where we're going to get this the wrong way around. Because people think, I need to optimize my hormones to be able to get a result. No, you don't. You need to do the things that are going to get you a result to then optimize your hormones. And that is the big difference between the two things. Let me explain that to you again. When you're sat there and you're thinking, I'm not getting a result, I'm not progressing, and I'm not moving forwards, the problem isn't some weird hack or medical intervention that is going to optimize your hormones. The solution to this problem is doing the things that you're not doing already. Sleeping well, walking more, training better with more quality, training harder, recovering better, improving your nutrition, like eating enough dietary fat, not chronically dieting all the time, managing your stress. Like, these are the things that are going to improve your hormone production and optimize your hormones. So we're thinking about this often the wrong way around. It is wholly possible that your hormones are not functioning to the best of their ability. But the solution to that isn't a weird hack. It isn't doing something crazy. It isn't medical intervention. Usually, it is doing these simple things that you need to do on a daily basis, like the things that I just listed. And that in turn will improve your hormone function. You are not broken if your hormones are not functioning properly. Let me tell you that. You are not broken if your hormones are not functioning properly. But the best way to optimize your hormones and improve hormone function to get more of the benefits, lower body fat, more muscle mass, more energy, better rest, better recovery, is by doing the simple things that you are not doing. That is where the solution lies. This subject does not need to be complex, right? To tell somebody and create distance between them and the result and say that you need to optimize your hormones, you need to optimize estrogen and somatotropan, that's how you're going to get a result, is very misleading. When you actually break it down to what estrogen and somatotropan do, what improves them, but also what is the solution out of this problem. And when you look at this the right way around, it is not optimizing hormones to get a result. It is getting the result to optimize hormones. That is the solution here. And look, the whole anchor to this whole thing is, if you're listening to this and you are doing 1,200 calories just because that's an arbitrary number that you were given, loads of cardio and spin classes, and you're getting like 5 hours of sleep a night, and you're not really managing your stress very well. Any of those things, I suppose you could add. Like, that's self-inflicted. You don't need to optimize your hormones. You need to stop self-inflicting problems on your own hormones. And look, the boring protocol here, if you want to take anything away from this, is one, to stop self-sabotaging the hormones, but two, like, lift hard, eat enough protein, don't underfuel yourself chronically for a long period of time, sleep well, manage your stress, keep a healthy level of body fat, drop the excess cardio. You can't. The problem is with all of that stuff, right? Like, obviously coaching makes a huge difference to people being able to do that stuff, but you can't really package that up and sell it. And I think that's kind of the problem here, right? The coach that's in question here, who's made these claims, they're trying to package up and sell something to you that you can't really package up and sell. Like, that's not really a product. So, as boring as it sounds, you don't need to optimize your hormones. What you need to do is understand what your hormones do in simple terms, how to improve them in simple terms, and understand what actions you can go away from this podcast with today and implement straight away, which will improve the function of your hormones if they're misfiring, not trying to hack your hormones so that you can then move forward. So I'll repeat what I said earlier. I think I said, what did I say? It's not optimizing your hormones to then get a result. It's getting a result to then optimize your hormones. Hopefully that makes sense. So listen, as always, hopefully this podcast has been really useful to you. Hopefully it's answered some questions that you may have around your hormones and around how your hormones function. And as always, as I said at the start, please, if you found this useful, I do this for free to help you guys, to give you more knowledge and more information and clarify some really complex subjects for you. So leave me a 5-star review, leave me a comment, let me know what you thought of the podcast. And look, if you have some suggestions as to what you would like me to talk about next and things you would like help with, leave a comment, let me know what that is, and I'll do my best to make sure it happens. So let me finish with this. Your hormones are not broken. The industry generally needs to stop trying to tell you to optimize your hormones. Stop trying to create distance between you and the result that you want. Stop trying to make it sound more complex so there is a dependency on us as coaches, and start refusing to or refuse to help you guys to refuse. These words not coming out properly. And what they need to do is help you guys to start refusing self-sabotage and help you move forward in a more efficient and effective manner. God, those words were tough. I'll see you on the next one.